According to the charity The Forward Trust, addiction in the UK is on the rise. The latest government figures show there are almost 300,000 adults in England alone receiving treatment for drug and alcohol addictions. For many more people, the stigma of addiction is a barrier to seeking help.
You carry a lot of shame and guilt, and you feel weak to even mention that you can't handle, that you're reliant on drink.
If I ask for help and I go to my GP, a social service is going to get involved. Am I going to lose my job?
But then I know people who, when they do cocaine, they can write incredible software.
The Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development report that only a third of employers provide information on the support available for drug and alcohol-related problems. I want to understand the unique challenges those with drug and alcohol addictions face in the workplace. By speaking to experts and those who've experienced addiction, I want to see what support currently exists, whether addiction can be destigmatised, and the benefits this might bring for employees and employers. Addiction comes in many forms: tobacco, prescription drugs, caffeine, gambling, work, even your mobile phone. If you can lose control over doing or using it, you can become addicted to it, which means you can pretty much become addicted to anything. It can also affect anyone.
There is no typical addict in my experience, and people come from different social classes, different occupations, different walks of life.
Daniel Fincham is a proud dad, sports fan and travel lover. 5 years ago, he was working in Richmond as a successful VP at a software company. On the outside, it looked like he had it all, but he was secretly drinking at least a bottle of vodka a day.
When I was working, my mantra was always be drinking. ABD. Working in a sales environment of always be closing. Mine was always be drinking. And it was very easy to do it at work because I was with a group of guys that liked to drink.
Daniel had always had a reputation as a drinker at work, but by 2019 he was fully dependent on alcohol.
I had to drink. I had to drink to work. I had to drink to function at home. I was completely reliant. I was a slave to alcohol. I was drinking to be more productive at work. And that, if I knew I had a big presentation to do, just having a couple of drinks would take the edge off, because that overthinker, that person that's telling me what other people are thinking of me, is quieting down. And it raises your own level of confidence a little bit.
Daniel is now in recovery and has since been diagnosed with autism. Neurodiversity has a complex link with addiction. A study by the Swedish Karolinska Institute suggests that people with autism are more than twice as likely than their peers to become addicted to alcohol or other drugs. The risk is even higher for people who have ADHD. Many people with addictions can still be fantastic employees. Daniel was keen to find out what his team thought of him whilst he was drinking, so we arranged to meet up with his close friend and former colleague, Motti.
I mean, you were well respected,
Yeah.
and the information and knowledge you had within the company, within the sector, was respected by not only us in the office, but guys in Boston as well, like your team in Boston. So, like, you knew what you were doing. You were still functioning, like, to make that team successful.
When Motti and the others found out about the extent of Daniel's drinking, they were worried about what the company would say.
I think maybe because we thought sort of like the worst of, like, that they would basically fire him rather than help. I think we felt like we could deal with it and it would be better than having them know. And yeah, I guess ultimately we felt like they would just be like, yeah, he's out, kind of thing.
Daniel was eventually signed off with anxiety and depression, but never mentioned his addiction to his employer. This is common for people with an addiction.
I think there's probably an element of feeling that people can't trust them as well to do their work. And I've found something similar with clients that I see, that they will never, even if they take time off work, they will never say it's because of their addiction. It will always be for some other reason.
According to a report from drug charity Release, people's drug use has increased since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. That trend was matched in Alcohol Change UK's findings, with 1 in 5 drinkers reported to have drunk more frequently since the start of the 2020 lockdowns. Nikki Rushin is someone who found the COVID lockdown a tipping point. Until 2020, she was working as a nurse. She never drank at work, but afterwards would be drinking as many as 3 bottles of wine a night.
Work till you're exhausted, get home, drink, pass out, work. That was it. That's not a life. At that point as well, you start to see, when I see pictures of myself, I can see how ill I looked. At that point, I didn't think I did. You think you're masking it, no one can tell, no one knows, and no one did. But I can see now my face, the puffiness, the redness, my eyes, you can see it in the eyes.
During the pandemic, an incident at work pushed her over the edge.
So I was working in healthcare when the pandemic hit. All the patients that I were looking after had COVID. And it was within mental health, so a lot of the patients didn't really have capacity. And I unfortunately got beaten up by a patient, so I ended up having 2 black eyes and a broken nose. So I had to be off work for a while, and this was when COVID first hit. There was no treatment, no one knew anything, it was terrifying. And it was a lot. And my drinking, when I was off work, then my drinking just spiked.
This proved to be a turning point, and eventually Nikki entered recovery. She wishes addiction was easier to talk about.
Years and years ago, mental health was never spoken about. You can't talk about my mental health, I'll lose my job, or people will think I'm mad, I'm crazy. Times have changed. People talk about mental health more. I think a lot more famous people are talking about addiction now, and that helps as well because it shows that it's not the tramp under the bridge.
One such famous person is TV and radio presenter Adrian Chiles. He's recently written a book exploring his relationship with alcohol. He worries that by not talking about addiction, employers could be rewarding addictive behaviour.
I think there's a danger with the workplace can end up functioning as a vector for addictive behaviour, say with alcohol. And it might be other drugs and so on, I don't know, but say with alcohol, that's where the boss and everyone goes drinking after the show in my case, or after work. That's where the decision's got to be made. And if you don't drink, you're missing out on that, on that social intercourse. So you just won't know people as well.
So what support currently exists for employees, and does it work? Employee assistance programs, or EAPs, offer anonymous counselling, support and information to help people get ahead of problems before they interfere with work performance. Eugene Farrell is the EAP Association chairman. He says they're effective in the short term and are good at dealing with the consequences of addiction, but not the causes.
So an EAP is good to help somebody with that in the moment support, but it's not a long term. It's not a program that can help with addiction in the long term. It's not the place to be. So don't think about EAPs as the right clinical approach to helping somebody with addiction. It's on part of the way, right at the very beginning, maybe for some people, and can signpost them to better support. But absolutely, you shouldn't rely upon an EAP as an addiction support program. It needs much more specialist support than any EAP can provide.
But according to the EAP Association's website, 25% of the UK workforce don't even have access to this short-term support. Professor Sir Kerry Cooper of the University of Manchester is a leading organisational psychologist who specialises in workplace well-being. He says these are big problems, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises.
They don't have HR departments. They don't have occupational health like the big public sector bodies have, like the private sector have. So they don't have the infrastructure to help people. Many of them don't have EAPs. And remember, 60% of people in the private sector don't work for the big boys. They work for the small and medium-sized companies.
Another way workplaces are making it easier for people to talk about personal issues is through training mental health first aiders. In 2021, there are over 77,000 of them in the UK. In my old job, I trained as a mental health first aider. Whilst the course touched on how to have conversations around substance misuse, one of the trickiest things that I found was how to recognise and help people with an issue that they were trying their best to hide. Thomas, not his real name, works in IT and manages a team of developers. He's recently been nominated Employee of the Year. He's also been using cocaine at work since 2015 and says it's easy to hide an addiction in the workplace.
It depends on what you're looking for and who's looking, right? You get exuberant, energetic people everywhere that aren't on anything stronger than tea. How do you know if they're on something? You don't. And my dealer at the time, I'd stop off there about 7:30 in the morning, 7:30, pick up, and be one of the first in the office, if not the first. I have an hour to myself with those like unisex toilets, you know, those cubicles, and just do what you want to do. But by the time people came in, then you just level off. The occasional one now and again, but you wouldn't be messed out of your head.
He says it's even easier now that more people are working from home.
So I tend to spend half my day in meetings dealing with my team of 4. With meetings, you can choose to have the camera on or off, so they don't know how tired I am. So I can do the meetings, I can contribute, and I've done my job for so long, I know straight away when I need to say something.
While there's a limit to what a manager can do, employers have a legal duty of care towards their employees.
There will be people who say that, your addictive behavior, your stress, your problems in your relationships outside of work are nothing to do with the workplace. But they are to do with the workplace in the sense that you enter the workplace and those things that are happening to you in your life are going to affect your performance. They're going to affect your well-being in general anyway.
Thomas, however, is sceptical using the support available in his workplace and believes an employer should not interfere with their employees' personal lives.
It's none of their business, and it's not for me to defend my personal rights. I've had jobs where I've had access to those employee telephone lines and stuff that you mentioned, but I was always suspicious of who are these people? It's an external company, and how much information can they retain, who they share it with, my company, third parties, advertising, that kind of stuff.
So, what more can employers do to help people feel comfortable seeking support for addiction? The CIPD says one of the most effective ways to remove the stigma of addiction in the workplace is to have policies that provide guidance around drug and alcohol-related disclosures, available support, and disciplinary procedures. Another way is to have emotionally intelligent line managers.
Because this boss has good emotional intelligence. They're prepared for you to talk to them about your problems with alcohol, your problems with workaholism, your problem, whatever your addictive behavior is or whatever stress you're experiencing. The more open your line manager is, the more you're prepared to talk about these problems and therefore get help. That is fundamental. And until we do that, the UK will still be bottom of the G7 on productivity per capita and 17th in the G20 on productivity per capita. And really it is a problem. It's not only a problem of stress and well-being, it's a problem for our productivity as well.
Since coming out of rehab, Daniel has drawn on his experiences and now runs his own tech company supporting people in recovery. Lucian claims to be the world's first digital recovery platform. It aims to connect people recovering from addiction by offering well-being classes, content and a community.
Really what we wanted to do is just shine a light on recovery so that people in the workspace like me, if they were sat there Googling, they could find Lucian. That's not about the pain of addiction, it's about the power of recovery. And if you can find ways to get people into recovery sooner and for longer, give more people a chance, you will eradicate more of that pain.
Daniel hopes one day his platform will be included in healthcare packages provided by employers. The reality is many people are still worried about the consequences of disclosing they have an addiction, but employers can make it easier for people to get help sooner.
What I didn't know is that there were loads of people like me, and that was the most comforting thing when I did meet people like me, was that I didn't feel so different, I didn't feel so wrong.
With addiction rates rising and the country in economic uncertainty, this education and support will lead to a happier, healthier and more productive workforce.
The stigma is no longer the problem, is no longer the main problem. I think it's getting people, free advice, free help, because there's next to nothing available. without paying for it, you know, and like, if companies can step in there, I think it's pretty vital that they do.